You know, Hollywood has a remarkable way of crafting stories that capture our imaginations. Think about it. I mean, is there a movie that you love? I still remember the very first movie I ever saw, The Empire Strikes Back. It was the summer of 1980. My brother Greg took me to go see it. Listen, I still remember I was utterly captivated by the portrayal of the classic battle between good and evil, where the fate of entire galaxies hinged on the conflict between light and dark. I mean, let's be real. This theme of good versus evil, it's a powerful narrative thread that resonates across so many different stories. Whether it's Vader and Luke in Star Wars, Frodo Baggins and Sauron in The Lord of the Rings, or even Aslan and the White Witch in Narnia, the essence of these tales, it lies in their depiction of this timeless struggle. At the heart of a great story is its ability to reflect and resonate with our own experiences and struggles. And I think that's what I love about our story that I want us to focus on today. Similarly, the Gospel of Matthew presents us with a story that is rich in tension, drama, and revelation. Even greater, it's not one of fiction. It is a story that played out in history. In the same chapter where we find Herod, a tyrant who ruled with fear and violence, we also encounter the Magi. These wise men from the East who are searching for the true king. And I believe that this story holds profound significance and wonder. So today, let's find some wonder in the revelation. Hear these words from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the East came to Jerusalem, and they asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and we've come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. And when he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they replied. "For this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and he said, "Go and search carefully for the child, and as soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." And after they heard the king, they went on their way. And the star that they had seen when it rose, it went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. Now hear this. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. I love that word. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. And then they opened their treasures and they presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And here's how it ends. "And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So our story begins with King Herod, who was known as Herod the Great, but honestly, I refer to him as Herod the Not So Great. Herod the king, during the time of Jesus' birth, was notorious for his brutal reign. Listen, he ruled with an iron fist, instilling fear in those under his power. He was paranoid about losing his throne, which led him to commit some horrible and some terrible acts. Herod's story is one of darkness and despair, a stark contrast to the hope that would be revealed through the coming of the Messiah. And in Matthew's gospel, Herod really represents the forces of evil and opposition that seek to thwart God's redemptive plan. His fear-driven actions stand in sharp contrast to the Magi's journey of faith and discovery. So, okay, who are the Magi? In the same chapter where Herod's tyranny is evident, we're introduced to these wise men from the East. Now, it's important to note that the wise men, the Magi, were Gentiles who weren't a part of the Jewish story, yet it was these Gentiles, as Matthew records, who play a pivotal role in the nativity narrative. Despite being outsiders, they studied the scriptures. They knew the scriptures, and they studied stars diligently. They were astronomers. They were attuned to something that Herod, with all of his power and knowledge, was not willing to see. The Messiah had arrived. The Magi's journey is one of revelation. They were guided by a star, a sign that led them to the King of the Jews. And their pursuit of truth and their willingness to follow where the signs led them, despite the dangers, is a beautiful testament to their faith. Listen, these wise men were not just scholars. They were seekers of the divine. They were drawn into a story that was unfolding before their eyes. Now, in many of our nativities, the wise men play a prominent role, right? Hanging right out there just with the shepherds, with their gifts, casually mingling with the animals that are grazing. Actually, it's a worthy note to make that the Magi, many believe, arrived much later than that first Christmas night. The truth is, Jesus was likely, some say, around 2 by the time the Magi reached him. Matthew says that they found Jesus in a house, not a manger, highlighting the passage of time. But the timing of their arrival, it really doesn't diminish their significance. In fact, I think it emphasizes the ongoing revelation of God's plan. The Magi's journey, it reminds us that the search for Jesus is a lifelong pursuit. The revelation of God's presence and purpose, it just unfolds over time, right? And those who seek him earnestly will find him, hey, even if they arrive later than expected. When the Magi finally encounter Jesus, they bring these gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. You know, I believe each gift was symbolic, revealing something profound about Jesus' identity and mission. Gold was a kingly gift, acknowledging Jesus as the King of Kings. It symbolized his authority and his rightful place as ruler over all. The frankincense was a priestly gift representing worship, the priestly role that Jesus would fulfill. It pointed to his role as our high priest, the one who would intercede on behalf of our Father. But myrrh sometimes throws me for a loop. Why myrrh? Well, myrrh was a gift associated with death, often used in burial practices. And this gift foreshadowed the sacrifice that Jesus would make on the cross. It was a reminder that the baby in the manger was destined to become the sacrificial lamb for the sins of the world. These gifts were not only valuable, but they were also deeply symbolic and prophetic. They revealed the fullness of who Jesus was and what he came to accomplish. And this is the focus of Matthew's story. Let that take your breath away for just a moment. Matthew spends more time on the Magi and Herod than he does on Mary or Joseph or the shepherds. This focus, I think, is significant, especially considering Matthew's background. As a tax collector, Matthew was once an outsider to the Jewish community, much like the Magi, who were outsiders to the Jewish story. Yet, through Jesus, Matthew found himself welcomed into God's redemptive plan. In many ways, the story of Magi, I think, is Matthew's story. A story of being brought into the light, of finding a place in God's unfolding narrative. It's a story that resonates with anyone who has ever felt like an outsider, who has ever longed to be a part of something greater than themselves. And I think it's a story that holds 2 specific gifts for us today. 1, settle into this. We are all welcomed into this story. The Magi were Gentiles, not part of the Jewish story, yet they were drawn into the nativity narrative. I love what Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2, for he himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one, who has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations. His purpose, Paul says, was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. Friends, this is good news. You know, I'm reminded of the story of Derek Redmond, who competed in the 1992 Summer Olympics in Barcelona. I don't know if any of you recall this. During the 400-meter race, Redmond tore his hamstring, and he falls to the ground in incredible agony. And as he's struggling to continue, there's this man who runs onto the track, who pushes through security, and who goes to Redmond's side, helping him to his feet. The man was Derek's dad. And his father helps his son cross the finish line. And I think this powerful moment, isn't this a beautiful picture of God's love for us? When we fall, when we're broken, when we're unable to go on, that God enters into our story through Jesus Christ. He carries us across the finish line, welcoming us into his presence and into the fullness of life that he offers. We are all welcome into this story. The second gift I think this holds for us is this. What a beautiful gift of hope. The story of the Magi, it's not just about their journey. It's about the hope that their journey represents. They came seeking the King, and they found him. This is the hope of Emmanuel, God with us. It's the hope that we are never alone, that God has come to dwell among us and to bring us into his eternal kingdom. John 1:1-5 captures this hope so beautifully. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing has been made that has been made. And in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. These are some of my favorite words. The light shines in the darkness, and darkness has not overcome it. This is the wonder of Revelation. The light of Christ shining into the darkness, revealing the way to life, and bringing hope to all who earnestly seek him. You know, I love something that Matthew does in his gospel. There's this bookend statement that you find in Matthew chapter 1 and Matthew chapter 28. In Matthew 1, we hear Emmanuel, God with us. And in Matthew chapter 28, one of the very last verses of Matthew, Jesus says, "Oh, by the way, I am with you always, even unto the end of the age." Friends, God is with us. The story of the Magi, it's a beautiful story of revelation, one where light breaks into the darkness. It's one where outsiders are welcomed into the family of God. They're insiders. The Magi's journey, it symbolizes the eternal quest of truth and the triumphant arrival for the true King. And it's right here in this epic story that we learn that we too are a part of this incredible journey. Just as the heroes of our favorite tales overcome darkness, we are invited to join in God's story of love and redemption through Jesus Christ. And here's the true wonder this Advent season. The wonder of this revelation is that it transcends our past. It is a living, ongoing story that we are called to participate in, bringing hope to our lives and to the world around us. So, my prayer, let this be a story that we not just tell with our lips, but one in which we live with our very lives. To God be the glory. Amen.